Brazilians chose Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva as their president this Sunday, marking a resurrection for the leftist after he was jailed for alleged corruption following his 2003 to 2010 two-term stint in office.
Brazil's current president, Jair Bolsonaro, is expected to publicly address the election outcome today, according to a minister in his cabinet. The lame duck leader has yet to make any kind of public comment on his loss. However, leading up to the election, Bolsonaro made multiple comments casting doubt on the integrity of Brazil's electoral system. Joining us now to discuss is co-host of the AM Wake Up and co-host of the Convo Couch, Craig Pasta Jardula. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me.
So help us understand, people are probably making some parallels between Bolsonaro's behavior here and the way that Donald Trump behaved at the end of the 2020 election. Is that a fair comparison?
Well, I mean, it's a fair comparison to say that some of the rhetoric is the same. I think the situation is totally different. I think it was a little bit more justified for Donald Trump because the system had changed so much due to COVID protocols. But Bolsonaro had won under the same system in 2018. So even though he can make some criticisms about the system being a direct recorded electronic device system, meaning there's no paper ballots and no paper ballot trail, yeah, you could do that. But once again, different situation.
And he has not actually, right, these were maybe comments before the election, right, that he was griping about it. He's not said anything to indicate, do you believe that he's going to do something to indicate that he doesn't accept the results?
No, I firmly believe he's going to come out and give a speech and he's going to accept the results and move on. It was a tough race. It was a lot closer than a lot of people had expected. I myself definitely thought there would be a second round, and I thought Bolsonaro would perform well. But I didn't think he performed this well to get within 2 points of Lula. So I think it's probably going to be a little bit tough for him, and he probably took the last day or so to digest it. But I assume, and I could be wrong, but I assume he's going to come forth and accept the results today.
Yeah, I saw that, the night of the election, he didn't come out and make any remarks, that people were watching his home and the lights kind of went out, signaling that he just wasn't going to come out and say anything that evening. And it reminded me actually of the night in 2016 when Hillary Clinton was very delayed coming out and making any kind of remark at that point as well, which people took to be a sour grapes moment, but ultimately resulted in a concession and kind of a normal transfer of power. Were you surprised at all by the speed with which the Biden administration came out congratulating Da Silva?
No, not at all. It was very clear for quite some time that the Biden administration was definitely rooting for Lula in the situation. So it was not a surprise whatsoever when they came out almost immediately. But I mean, that's the great thing about the Brazil election is that you get results that night, just like in a lot of other Central and South American countries.
And can you, just for some more added context, explain how significant this win is? We described it as a victory for the left, and there are now maps circulating about demonstrating the overwhelming volume of countries in South America that are now led by people who describe themselves as on the left. Is this part of a broader wave in that region? And specifically in Brazil, why does Lula's victory resonate so strongly for people?
Well, it resonates so strongly because he was he was twice the president beforehand, and his history and what he did for Brazil meant so much, especially for the poor. I really don't look at this win as a left versus right kind of paradigm like a lot of Americans do, because I don't think they see what's going on. This is more of a populist movement, and these countries want national sovereignty. They want the right to choose their own ways, their own laws and whatnot. So I don't think this is more of like this broader left pink movement. I think it's more of a populist movement, a national sovereignty movement. So that's the way I look at this particular situation in Brazil.
Were there major differences between the two candidates on those issues? Right? Doesn't I guess Bolsonaro's movement would sort of claim the same mantle? Would be my understanding. What are the different flavors of the candidates in terms of national sovereignty, national identity, et cetera?
Well, I mean, the results are almost, 51-49. So you can see the country's definitely split. And I mean, it's just, I think this is more about the times rather than the ideology, with it being the COVID protocols and what Bolsonaro had to do, and the fact that Lula couldn't run in his last election. I did get the sense when I was down in Brazil that a lot of the cultural issues kind of went in the favor of Bolsonaro, where they liked some of his positions, even when he said he was tough on crime. And there's a lot of the working classes moved into a gig economy. There was a lot of Uber drivers, delivery drivers, but I think they were happy to at least have a job, and as the COVID protocols were going on. But where Lula really succeeded was economically, and he succeeded with the poorest of the poor. When we went to the favelas, they felt that Bolsonaro had abandoned them. And a lot of the landowners, the indigenous landowners, also felt with these labor groups that that's where Bolsonaro fell short, where Lula has always championed himself of the poor. And that was part of his whole campaign. He even said, I want every Brazilian to wake up every morning, have a cup of coffee, a breakfast, and a roof over their heads. So I think that's where the two differences lied. And I think that's what played out in this election, that Brazil has so many people in poverty that's why Lula won this race.
Yeah, and unlike a lot of politicians who might claim to be pushing a better populist economic message, Lula actually had some receipts here. Obviously, his Bolsa Familia program was incredibly popular. And do you think that was part of the factor that militated in his favor here, that the poor people actually had experienced some benefits under him in his previous leadership?
Absolutely, Bree. When we went to the favelas, the people, that's what they echoed, the old times of Lula when he was able to get them resources. I always say this, Lula's not a communist, but he was definitely a compromise between the capitalist and the communist, the way he would allocate resources to the poor of the poor. The only issue is that I think the left is glossing by some of his old school kind of globalist ties, and that's what needs to be paid attention to moving forward. We understand that he's going to allocate to the poorest of poor. We just have to watch those other ties, that, especially when it comes to the foreign policy, with Haiti kind of coming up. So those are the reasons why Lula is back in power, but there are definitely concerns on the table.
So what does the future hold for Bolsonaro? Obviously, this was a very, very, very narrow loss. What could he get back into politics, be still in the mix for whenever the next election is?
Absolutely, that could happen. I mean, that's what I'm going to be watching. Like I said, he overperformed. With Lula's past and his approval ratings when he left office, and being a populist candidate that almost, eradicated, extreme poverty. Bolsonaro definitely did overperform in the situation. If you look at Lula's past, how he almost eradicated extreme poverty, very popular when he left office. Bolsonaro, I would have thought, would have been finished way further back. The fact that he did overperform, that could possibly mean a future for him. He can stay in the light, go out there and continue to campaign for the next 4 years, and then maybe have a shot of taking back the presidency if Lula doesn't perform as he expects to.
And thank you so much for that, Craig. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you for having me on, guys.
And we'll have more Rising for you right after this.